In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, just a short journey south of Naples, there was once a city so alive, so bustling with the ordinary heartbeat of daily life that no one who walked its stone streets could have imagined how suddenly it would all end. Pompeii was more than a Roman town. It was a place of laughter, ambition, and ritual, where merchants argued in the market, bakers stoked their ovens before dawn, and the scent of olive oil and fresh bread mixed with a briny air drifting in from the Bay of Naples. The people of Pompeii lived as if their tomorrow was guaranteed. In the final moments before disaster, they were ordinary souls living ordinary days, and that is what makes their story unforgettable. Pompeii's story begins long before the disaster that froze it in time. Founded centuries earlier by the Oscans and later claimed by the Romans, it was transformed into a thriving resort city, a playground for the wealthy and a home to thousands of craftsmen, merchants, and slaves. Its walls were painted with vivid frescoes, its courtyards echoed with fountains, and its amphitheater was filled with the roar of a crowd eager for spectacle. To live in Pompeii was to live in the warm embrace of prosperity. The city was wrapped in vineyards and fields of fertile volcanic soil that produced some of the finest wines in the empire. Travelers from Rome came here to escape the noise of the capital, to find pleasure, to conduct business, and to indulge in the comforts of the good life. And yet, looming above this idyllic existence was a silent threat. Mount Vesuvius rose like a giant beyond the rooftops, a familiar shape on the horizon. The people admired it. They called it a mountain, not a volcano. They didn't even have a word for volcano as we understand it. Vesuvius had been quiet for generations, its last major eruption too far back for living memory. It was seen as part of the landscape, as permanent and trustworthy as the sky. No one suspected it was a sleeping beast. As the summer of 79 AD drew to a close, Pompeii was alive with festivals and trade. Shops opened early, hawkers shouted from the sidewalks, and children darted through narrow streets paved in ancient stone. The wealthier citizens reclined in their atriums, their walls decorated with mythological scenes, their floors gleaming with intricate mosaics that still astonish the modern eye. In bathhouses, steam rose into vaulted ceilings as neighbors exchanged gossip. In taverns, wine flowed, and the scent of roasted meats filled the air. To the people of Pompeii, this was a good life, perhaps even eternal. But beneath the surface, the earth was restless. Subtle tremors shook the ground. Dogs barked at nothing, wells ran dry, birds fled. These were warnings the people could not read. Earthquakes were not uncommon here. They were used to them. 17 years earlier, a quake had damaged parts of the city, but it had been rebuilt, stronger and richer than before. Why should anyone fear a mountain that had always been silent? Then came the day that would change everything. It was late August or possibly early autumn when Vesuvius gave its first terrible cry. At around midday, the ground shuddered with unnatural force. A sound like thunder rolled across the bay. A massive column of ash and smoke shot into the sky, climbing higher and higher until it blotted out the sun. Pliny the Younger, a young Roman who watched from across the water, would later describe it as a pine tree of ash spreading wide at the top. Day became night in Pompeii. Panic spread through the streets as roofs shook and tiles crashed down. People ran without knowing where to go. Some fled toward the sea, others toward the city gates, others prayed to gods who would not answer. Within hours, pumice stones and ash rained down with relentless force. Roofs collapsed. Fires broke out. The air grew thick and unbreathable. Those who stayed indoors thought the walls would protect them, but the weight of ash was merciless. Many died huddled together in darkness, clutching their children. Others tried to escape through the gates, but the streets were choked with debris. By nightfall, Pompeii was buried under meters of volcanic matter, but the worst was still to come. In the early morning, pyroclastic surges, searing waves of superheated gas and ash roared down Vesuvius, engulfing everything in their path. Temperatures soared to hundreds of degrees in an instant. Those still alive had no time to scream. Their bodies were flash-burned, their final poses preserved in ash. In just over 24 hours, Pompeii ceased to exist as a living city. Its people were gone, but their world was sealed away like a time capsule beneath a thick gray shroud. For centuries, Pompeii lay forgotten. Overgrown fields covered the ruins. New generations lived their lives above the buried past, unaware of the city beneath their feet. Legends whispered of an ancient city lost to the wrath of the mountain, but no one could imagine the level of preservation hidden underground. It wasn't until the 18th century that explorers began to uncover what had been frozen in time. As they dug through layers of ash, they found walls still painted with vibrant colors, bread still sitting in ovens, cups still resting on tables. It was as if the city had paused mid-breath. One of the most haunting discoveries came when they found the cavities left behind by decomposed bodies. By carefully filling these voids with plaster, archaeologists revealed the final moments of Pompeii's people. Men, women, children, and animals, all caught in their last desperate gestures. A mother shielding her child, a man covering his face from the ash, a dog twisting against its chain. These plaster casts gave the dead faces again, voices again, a story again. Pompeii was no longer a legend. It was real and it was human. The rediscovery of Pompeii changed our understanding of the ancient world. No other site captured daily Roman life with such intimacy. Frescoes revealed the colors Romans loved. Graffiti on walls revealed their humor, their rivalries, their politics, their desires. Marketplaces revealed the rhythm of commerce. Brothels revealed their hidden appetites. Temples revealed the gods they trusted. Homes revealed their ambitions, their status, their dreams. In Pompeii, history wasn't written in books. It was painted on walls, carved in stone, baked into bread. Every excavation revealed new secrets. An ancient bakery, still filled with millstones and bread loaves, preserved like relics of an interrupted breakfast. A bath complex where the steam still seemed to linger in the air. A theater where the stage once echoed with the laughter of Roman crowds. A gladiator barracks where armor and helmets remained neatly arranged, waiting for games that would never happen. As the city emerged from the ash, it became a window into time. It revealed not the stories of emperors and generals, but of ordinary lives. The merchant, the baker, the slave, the lover, the child. In Pompeii, the past isn't distant. It is tangible, close, almost breathing. You can walk its streets and imagine footsteps beside yours. The tragedy of Pompeii also exposed how fragile civilization can be. This was a city that felt invincible. Its people built temples, homes, and gardens, believing tomorrow would look like today. They didn't know the mountain was awake. In their story, we glimpse our own vulnerability, how quickly everything we build can be swallowed by the earth beneath us. And yet, there's also a strange kind of mercy in the disaster. If Pompeii had not been buried, it might have been eroded, rebuilt, forgotten. Instead, it was preserved. A catastrophe became a time machine. What was once a tragedy is now a gift to history. Today, as millions of visitors walk through the ancient streets, they see more than ruins. They see frescoes still vibrant, mosaic floors still glittering, fountains that once splashed cool water into courtyards. They see the sharp ruts of cartwheels etched into the cobblestones. They see the plaster casts, silent, motionless witnesses to a day the world stopped. The city continues to reveal new secrets. Archaeologists are still excavating, still finding rooms sealed for nearly 2 millennia, still uncovering frescoes so fresh they look like they were painted yesterday. Some of these rooms belong to the wealthy, filled with luxury and art. Others belong to the poor, revealing cramped spaces and hard lives. Together, they form a complete portrait of a city that died but refused to disappear. Pompeii has become more than a site of history. It is a symbol, a reminder of how the ordinary becomes extraordinary in a single moment. A place where tragedy froze beauty in place. A story of humanity interrupted and then rediscovered. Imagine for a moment a baker rising before dawn, lighting the oven to make bread for the day's customers, a girl braiding her hair before meeting her friends at the fountain, a man unlocking his shop, ready to haggle over prices, a priest offering incense to Jupiter. None of them knew this would be their last sunrise. None of them heard the warning beneath the silence of the mountain. When the eruption came, it did not distinguish between rich or poor, slave or master. All were equal in the face of Vesuvius. Their lives ended in the same ash, their stories buried together, waiting to be found. The rediscovery of Pompeii centuries later was more than an archaeological triumph. It was a resurrection. The city became a mirror reflecting our own world back at us, our habits, our comforts, our illusions of permanence. Pompeii shows us not only how people lived, but how quickly life can end. But Pompeii's story does not end with its destruction. It continues with us, with the footsteps of every visitor who walks its streets, with every artifact carefully preserved, with every lesson drawn from its frozen moment in time. The lost city speaks in silence, through stones, through ash, through the stillness of plaster faces. Vesuvius still stands today, looming over the bay, beautiful and silent, much like it did before that fateful day. It is a reminder that nature holds the power to both create and erase. Scientists watch it carefully now, for it still breathes beneath the surface. Yet the people who live nearby continue their lives, as people always do, believing in tomorrow. Pompeii is not just a place on the map. It is a story about us all, about the fragility of what we build, the stubborn endurance of memory, and the way time can both destroy and preserve. In its streets, time stopped. And because of that, the voices of a lost world whispered to us still. Their laughter is gone, but the echoes remain. Their bodies turn to dust, but their gestures endure. The city died, but its soul was captured in ash. When you walk through Pompeii today, you walk through a moment that never ended. It is a city caught between life and death, between memory and silence. A city that the earth tried to bury, but history refused to forget. Pompeii endures not because of the disaster that destroyed it, but because of the lives that once filled it. And as long as its stones remain, those lives will never truly disappear. The world that Pompeii reveals is more than ash and bones. It is a mosaic of human experiences woven into the architecture of the city itself. Its streets are like veins, branching out from the forum at the heart of the city, where merchants once shouted above the noise of carts and sandals. The rhythm of everyday life pulsed here. Public fountains gushed with water carried through intricate aqueducts. The hum of conversation echoed under porticos. Shopkeepers leaned over counters, their stalls filled with oil jars, dried figs, olives, honey, and bronze tools. This was not a remote outpost. Pompeii was alive, connected to the Roman world through trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean. Every corner of Pompeii speaks of community. The bakeries that lined the streets weren't just for bread. They were meeting points. The taverns weren't just for drink. They were where rumors and news traveled faster than messengers. The baths weren't simply for cleaning. They were social clubs, where friendships were made and politics discussed. In a time when few people could read, the walls themselves became their newspapers. Graffiti announced everything from gladiator games to private insults to romantic confessions. It is through these scrawled messages that we hear their voices most clearly. One man wrote that he was here with his friends and had a good time. Another warned others not to trust a certain man. Another confessed to falling in love. They didn't know they were writing messages for us to read 2,000 years later. The homes of Pompeii reveal the layers of society. The wealthy built grand villas with atriums that caught sunlight through open roofs, with gardens decorated by fountains and marble statues. These spaces were not only private retreats but also statements of power. The walls were covered with frescoes depicting gods, myths, and family achievements. Floors were adorned with mosaics so precise that each stone seemed to hold a story. In the triclinium, the dining room, guests reclined on couches while slaves brought food seasoned with herbs and sauces. They feasted on bread, fish, olives, figs, cheese, and occasionally delicacies like dormice or imported spices from distant provinces. The poor lived more humbly, sometimes in small apartments above shops or in modest homes along narrow alleys. But even these simpler spaces reveal pride. A painted niche here, a small shrine there, a carefully swept doorway. The people of Pompeii, rich or poor, shared the same city, walked the same streets, watched the same spectacles. Their differences in wealth were visible, but their humanity was shared. At the edge of the city stood the amphitheater, one of the oldest surviving stone arenas in the Roman world. It could hold up to 20,000 spectators, far more than the city's population. Crowds came not only from Pompeii but from the surrounding towns. Here, under the blazing sun, gladiators fought for glory, sometimes to the death. The roar of the crowd, the smell of blood and sand, the thrill of combat, all of it was part of the spectacle that defined Roman entertainment. In Pompeii, these games were as important as festivals or politics. They were moments when the entire city came together. Religious life pulsed through every street. Temples dedicated to Jupiter, Apollo, Venus, and other gods stood proud in the forum. Altars were everywhere, in homes, gardens, street corners. Religion was not a separate part of life. It was woven into daily routines. People lit lamps before household gods, offered incense, whispered prayers for good harvests, good business, safe births. When earthquakes shook the ground, they offered sacrifices. When diseases spread, they sought omens in the flight of birds or the patterns in the liver of a sacrificed animal. The gods were everywhere, always listening, always watching. What makes Pompeii unique is that it does not show us a single grand event, but a world in motion. The eruption did not freeze a temple alone, or a palace, or a battlefield. It froze everything: a loaf of bread in the oven, a lamp still on the floor, coins spilled near a body, likely from someone trying to flee. It is these ordinary fragments that make the city extraordinary. Historians and archaeologists walk through its streets, not as tourists, but as time travelers. They do not have to imagine how Romans lived. They can see it, touch it, read it. The city also speaks of diversity. Pompeii was a port town, and people from across the empire passed through. Slaves from the east, merchants from Greece, sailors from North Africa. You can see their presence in the names carved into doorways, in the art on the walls, in the imported goods found in shops. It was a cosmopolitan society, buzzing with languages and ideas. This blend of cultures enriched the city but also made it vulnerable. It was a crossroads where news, goods, and diseases alike could travel quickly. On the morning of the eruption, all these lives intersected for the last time. The baker opened his shop. The tavern keeper swept his floor. A gladiator may have polished his helmet, unaware he would never step into the arena again. A young woman adjusted her necklace, ready to meet someone she loved. A slave carried water. A merchant counted his coins. A priest prepared an offering. All of them shared the same horizon, the same sun, the same mountain rising in the distance, and then it was all erased. But in being erased, Pompeii was also immortalized. Unlike most cities, it did not decay slowly over centuries. It was locked away in the moment of its death. When the ash settled, it sealed off air, moisture, and time. What was once a tragedy became a preservation chamber. For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii slept. The rediscovery was accidental. In 1748, workers digging in the area uncovered walls, artifacts, and human remains. At first, they thought it was Herculaneum, another city buried by Vesuvius. Soon it became clear they had found something vast. As they dug deeper, entire streets emerged, complete with houses, temples, and shops. Unlike other ruins, these were not bare foundations. The walls still stood, the paintings still shone. It was as if the city had been paused mid-sentence. Archaeologists quickly realized the significance of what they had found. Pompeii offered a direct window into the daily life of a Roman city. No other site in history had been so completely, accidentally preserved. It wasn't just the big monuments that survived, it was the small things. Rings on fingers, jars of olives, wooden furniture turned to ash but leaving its imprint. Even food, carbonized but recognizable, still sat in bowls and pots. Then came one of the most haunting breakthroughs, the plaster casts. In the soft volcanic ash, the bodies had decomposed over the centuries, leaving empty cavities in the exact shape of their final moments. Archaeologists poured plaster into these voids, revealing faces, hands, even expressions. You can still see them today, a child curled up, a man shielding his mouth, a woman clutching a necklace. These figures are not statues. They are people, real people, frozen in the last seconds of their lives. To stand among these casts is to feel time collapse. The distance between past and present shrinks. You don't need to imagine their fear, it's written in their posture. You don't need to invent their story, it's lying in the ground. Pompeii does not ask you to believe in the past, it shows it to you. Over the years, Pompeii has continued to give up its secrets. Entire villas have been uncovered with frescoes so bright they seem newly painted. Temples have revealed ritual objects. Public buildings have told the story of civic life, politics, and social order. Every new excavation brings something that challenges what we thought we knew about Roman society. But perhaps the greatest lesson Pompeii teaches is that history is not a distant echo. It is right beneath our feet, waiting to speak. In the centuries after its rediscovery, Pompeii captured the imagination of the world. Artists, writers, and travelers came to see this city locked in time. It inspired paintings, novels, even operas. The Victorians saw in it a glimpse of both Roman grandeur and Roman decay. Modern scientists saw in it a laboratory of history. Every generation finds its own reflection in Pompeii. For some, it is a warning. For others, it is a wonder. Even now, archaeologists are still uncovering rooms that have not been seen since the day of the eruption. Each layer peeled back is another whisper from the past. A kitchen where bread was baked, a garden where roses once grew, a bedroom with a lamp still lying where it fell. And in these discoveries, we find something more than artifacts. We find connection. We find the humanity that time tried to bury. The city lay buried, its streets silent beneath meters of volcanic ash. For the first few years after the eruption, the land above Pompeii was gray and lifeless. The people who survived in nearby towns believed it was cursed ground. They spoke of the mountain's rage, of gods who had punished a sinful city. Some tried to return to recover what they had lost, to dig through the heavy blanket of ash for jewelry, statues, coins, but most gave up. The mountain had buried not just buildings but memories. Within a generation, Pompeii was forgotten by name. The living moved on. The dead remained beneath the earth, but beneath that gray layer, something remarkable was happening. The ash sealed the city like a vault. Rain could not reach it. Sunlight could not erode it. Wood, paint, food, metal, stone, all were held in suspension. It was not preservation in the way a museum protects, but something stranger, quieter, more complete. Pompeii did not decay slowly like other ancient cities. It simply slept. Centuries rolled on. Empires rose and fell. The language of Pompeii changed. The gods changed. The map of the world changed. Above ground, farmers began to plant vineyards again. They plowed their fields and found bits of stone, fragments of frescoes, shards of pottery, coins that shimmered like small echoes of a world long gone. But no one understood that beneath their feet lay a frozen city. In the medieval era, locals whispered stories of hidden ruins buried under the soil near Vesuvius. Some said they were Roman villas. Others said treasure chambers. A few adventurous diggers found statues or columns and sold them to nobles. But Pompeii remained undisturbed, a secret the earth kept well. It wasn't until the 18th century, in the age of curiosity and empire, that its slumber would end. In 1748, workmen digging for a new palace stumbled on something unusual. As they dug, they struck walls, real, painted walls. Further digging revealed entire rooms, still decorated, still standing. They had no idea they were opening the door to a lost city. What they saw shocked them. Colors as vivid as if they had been painted yesterday, floors of intricate mosaics, sculptures untouched by time. Word spread through the kingdom of Naples. Scholars, nobles, and adventurers rushed to the site. Slowly, carefully, Pompeii began to awaken. At first, the digging was clumsy. Treasure hunters and collectors cared more about statues and gold than about history. Artifacts were removed without care. Frescoes were cut from walls and taken to royal collections. But even in this early period, the uniqueness of Pompeii could not be ignored. It was not like Rome's broken ruins or Greece's weathered columns. This was a city in full, a time capsule, an entire world that had been sealed shut for almost 17 centuries. As more of Pompeii emerged from the earth, it began to tell its story. Streets reappeared, doorways opened, Frescoes gleamed, inscriptions covered the walls like echoes of voices. The more they uncovered, the more vivid the story became. They found bread still in ovens, amphorae still stacked in storerooms, furniture outlines still visible in ash. There was no need to imagine the past. It stood before them, silent but clear. By the 19th century, Pompeii became a sensation across Europe. Artists and intellectuals flocked to the site, seeing in it both the beauty and the fragility of civilization. Writers described the feeling of walking through the ghostly streets, of seeing plaster casts of people caught in their last breath. Painters recreated scenes of daily Roman life based on the walls they saw. For many, Pompeii became a mirror of their own societies, a warning that no empire, no culture, no city, no matter how advanced, was invincible. The plaster casting technique, introduced in the 1860s, changed everything. Giuseppe Fiorelli, the director of excavations, realized that the soft ash still contained the shapes of decomposed bodies. By pouring plaster into these voids, he revealed human figures in their final poses. Suddenly, Pompeii wasn't just walls and streets anymore, it was people. The fear on their faces, the way their hands were raised to protect themselves, the way they huddled together, it made history human again. Visitors walked among them, staring at figures frozen in terror. A man shielding his mouth from the ash, a child curled against their mother, a dog twisting against its chain. Pompeii was no longer an abstract ruin. It was a tragedy that could be seen, touched, and felt. Excavation expanded steadily. The Forum, the heart of civic life, reappeared in the light. The amphitheater emerged from the ash, its stone seats still intact. Temples and baths came back to life. Villas revealed their frescoes vibrant with gods and myths. Shops reopened in silence, their counters still marked by the grooves of amphorae. Step by step, the city rose again. But with rediscovery came responsibility. Pompeii was fragile. What had been protected by ash for nearly 2,000 years was now exposed to wind, rain, sunlight, and human touch. Frescoes faded, mosaics cracked, walls crumbled, looters chipped away pieces. Souvenir hunters stole artifacts. For every discovery, a piece of Pompeii was also lost. Archaeologists faced a paradox. The more they uncovered, the more they endangered what they revealed. Efforts to preserve Pompeii grew alongside the fascination with it. Italy made the site a protected heritage zone. Scholars from around the world came to study not only the grand villas of the elite but also the cramped quarters of the poor, the taverns, the brothels, the graffiti-covered walls. They came to understand how people truly lived, how they loved, what they believed, what they feared. And in these details, Pompeii became more than a Roman ruin. It became the closest thing the world had to a living Roman city, frozen at the edge of disaster. The eruption itself, once a myth, was also illuminated by the city's remains. Ash layers told the story minute by minute. First came the pumice rain that buried the rooftops. Then came the pyroclastic surges that brought death. Bodies found near doorways spoke of people trying to flee. Bodies found in basements told of people who sought shelter and suffocated. Those found on the road to the gates showed how many died in the act of running. The city was not destroyed in an instant but over long, terrifying hours. Every artifact was a clue. Every wall, every cast, every layer of ash was a sentence in the story of that day. And yet, Pompeii is not only about death, it is about the life that came before. The frescoes speak of beauty, of gods, of family pride. The mosaics speak of craftsmanship. The temples speak of faith. The graffiti speaks of jokes, of rivalries, of lovers, of petty arguments. When we listen to Pompeii, we hear voices, ordinary voices, not emperors and generals, but bakers, slaves, children, merchants, gladiators, priests, the very people who built the empire from the ground up. Pompeii also became a tool for science. Historians and archaeologists used it to understand Roman diet, engineering, sanitation, trade, language, even diseases. Carbonized food revealed what they ate. Toilets revealed how they managed waste. Wells revealed how they stored water. Inscriptions revealed how they wrote and spoke. In Pompeii, history isn't told by kings, it's told by the street. As decades passed, Pompeii entered a new chapter. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Restoration teams worked tirelessly to stabilize walls, clean frescoes, protect the site from erosion. Digital mapping and 3D scanning brought new ways to study it without damaging the fragile ruins. Excavations continued carefully, revealing courtyards that hadn't felt air since the year 79 AD. Every new discovery reminded the world how much the past can still surprise us. But Pompeii remains vulnerable. The same forces that once buried it, earth, weather, human hands still threaten it. Floods, storms, and neglect have damaged parts of the site. Tourism brings millions of footsteps every year, wearing away ancient stones. Preservation is a race against time. Archaeologists and conservators must balance the desire to learn with the duty to protect. To walk through Pompeii today is to see both a miracle and a challenge. Still, the city stands. The Forum still opens wide to the sky. The amphitheater still echoes faintly with imagined crowds. The villas still whisper with painted gods. The plaster figures still lie where they fell. Silent but speaking louder than any monument, Pompeii endures not as a ruin alone, but as a voice that calls across centuries, telling us to remember how fragile we are, and how powerful our stories can be when time tries to erase them. Even as modernity grows louder around it, Pompeii holds its own silence, a silence that isn't empty, but full of memory, a silence that is not the end of the story, but its continuation. Beneath that silence lies the heartbeat of a city that lived, died, and lives again through us. Pompeii today is not just a ruin, it is a living archive, a place where time has folded in on itself, allowing the distant past to breathe through the cracks of the present. Visitors walk down the same stone streets that chariots once rattled across, tracing the grooves carved by wheels to millennia ago. They step past walls marked with graffiti written in Latin slang, words as casual as if they had been scrawled yesterday. Every doorway, every courtyard, every faded fresco is a portal, and though silence dominates the air, the city feels alive, not because people live there now, but because they once did, and they left everything behind. Modern archaeologists approach Pompeii with reverence and precision. Unlike the treasure hunters of the past, today's teams work slowly, like surgeons of memory. They map every layer, analyze every texture, preserve every inch of paint. Technology has given them new ways to see beneath the surface without tearing it apart. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and 3D reconstruction allow them to virtually lift layers of ash without disturbing what lies below. In a way, they are carefully listening to what the earth has been whispering for centuries. As they work, Pompeii continues to reveal new secrets. In recent years, entire rooms have been found sealed just as they were left, a child's cradle with its fragile wood still intact, a mosaic floor that sparkles in sunlight for the first time since 79 AD, a hallway painted with birds and flowers so delicate it seems impossible they survived. Every find deepens the portrait of a city frozen at its most ordinary moment, and that is precisely why it matters. History often remembers the grand, the powerful, the wars, and the emperors. Pompeii remembers everything else. It remembers the human, but preservation is a race. The same volcanic ash that once protected Pompeii now threatens to erode it as it meets air, water, and time. Modern conservationists must fight two battles: the slow decay of the ruins themselves, and the impact of the millions who come to see them. Tourism fuels the site's survival financially, but every footstep wears down the stones, every fingerprint oils the walls, every careless act chips away at the fragile shell of history. Preservationists have to be both guardians and negotiators, balancing access with protection. Beyond the physical site, Pompeii has become something bigger, an idea, a symbol, a warning. Its story is etched into the collective imagination of the world. Writers, poets, filmmakers, painters, musicians all have turned to Pompeii to make sense of human fragility. It is not just a Roman tragedy, it is a mirror. It forces us to confront a truth that civilizations prefer to ignore, that time is not a straight line of progress, but a cycle of rise and fall, of life and loss. In schools, students learn of Pompeii not only as a historical event, but as a lesson in how power and beauty can vanish in a single day. The city that once echoed with laughter, commerce, and prayer turned to ash without warning. Its people, frozen in their final acts, remind us that history is made not only by those who plan it, but also by those who are caught in its storms. The eruption of Vesuvius was not a grand battle or a political decree. It was nature indifferent, unstoppable, absolute. Yet Pompeii is also a story of memory, a story of how the past can be found, pieced together, and brought back to speak. It teaches us that history doesn't belong to dusty archives. It lies beneath our feet, waiting to be listened to. It shows how much we can learn not just from what was built, but from what was lost. And in doing so, it makes the past present again. Modern scientific studies in Pompeii have revealed things that history books never could. By studying bones, scientists have learned about Roman health, diet, and even DNA. By analyzing volcanic layers, geologists have reconstructed the precise sequence of the eruption, minute by minute. By reading graffiti and inscriptions, linguists have heard the informal voices of ordinary people, the unfiltered language of the street. These aren't fragments of myth, they're human fingerprints, immortalized in ash. And then there are the plaster casts, perhaps the most haunting part of Pompeii. When people stand before them, something changes. The distance between then and now collapses. It is no longer an abstract tragedy, it's real. A man shielding his face from heat that has long cooled, woman clutching the hand of someone she loved, a child curled up, perhaps dreaming until the very end. These are not statues, they are moments. They are final breaths, held for eternity. Around these figures, visitors fall silent. The noise of tour groups fades. Even the wind seems softer. It is a silence that commands respect. In those moments, Pompeii is not just an archaeological site. It is a graveyard, a monument, and a storyteller. It is the voice of people who never thought they'd be remembered, yet they are. As night falls over Pompeii today, the city transforms again. The modern world retreats to the edges. The outlines of the streets emerge in the quiet. You can almost feel the weight of history pressing through the stones. Somewhere in the distance, Vesuvius looms, dark and still, but never forgotten. It is both the destroyer and the preserver. Without it, Pompeii would have faded like any other Roman town. Because of it, Pompeii became immortal. This duality is what draws people here. Not just the beauty of ancient art or the grandeur of Roman engineering, but the weight of the story it carries. Pompeii forces us to stand still, to look backward, and to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens when everything we build vanishes overnight? What will remain of us centuries from now? What will the earth remember? Scholars often call Pompeii a time capsule, but it is more than that. It is a message. It reminds us that history doesn't simply sit in museums. It sleeps beneath fields, beneath cities, beneath our very feet. It waits for us to rediscover it, not to own it, but to listen. Pompeii speaks of love, ambition, everyday lives, and the quiet power of memory. It tells us that while empires rise and fall, stories endure. Ash can bury a city, but it cannot bury its humanity. For over 2 centuries, Pompeii has changed the way we understand the past. It reshaped archaeology, inspired art, and fueled imaginations across continents. It continues to reveal itself piece by piece, like a book whose pages were buried but never burned. And as long as it stands, it will remind us of both the beauty and the fragility of our own world. Even now, as people from across the globe walk those cobbled streets, as cameras click and guides speak in dozens of languages, Pompeii is watching silently. It has seen far greater empires than ours. It has seen lives erased in seconds and then remembered centuries later. It has seen how the earth gives and takes, how memory fades and returns. And in that stillness, it teaches Vesuvius remains there, looming over the Bay of Naples. Scientists monitor it closely. It is not asleep, only resting. Modern cities now thrive at its feet. Tourists marvel at the same mountain that once devoured an entire civilization. It is a strange and sobering sight, life blooming where death once fell like fire from the sky. It is a reminder that history repeats itself, not always in the same way, but with the same rhythm. Pompeii's story has no final chapter. It continues to be written with each discovery, each restoration, each visitor who listens carefully. It is not frozen anymore. It breathes through the people who remember it. The ash may have sealed its fate in 79 AD, but humanity has made sure it will not vanish into silence again. And perhaps, centuries from now, when future generations look back at us, they will walk through our ruins the way we walk through Pompeii. They will read our walls, study our bones, trace our footprints, and maybe they too will understand something about who we were, not through our power, but through our humanity. That is what Pompeii truly gives us. Not just a glimpse of the past, but a mirror, a reminder that we too are part of history, that we too can be remembered, not only for how we lived, but for what we left behind. And somewhere, beneath layers of ash or time or memory, the story will wait, just like Pompeii did. Centuries after the city was silenced, Pompeii continues to speak. It speaks not through grand monuments or the voice of rulers, but through whispers buried in the ground. A single cracked wall, a faded mosaic, a child's footprint hardened in ash. Each fragment is a word in a story that refuses to be forgotten. It is a city that died in a single day but has lived on for nearly 2,000 years. Few places in the world carry time so carefully. To walk through Pompeii is to walk through an unfinished conversation between the past and the present. The stones under your feet once heard the sound of sandals and hooves, the shouts of merchants, the laughter of children, the prayers of the faithful. They heard the screams too on that final day, when the sun turned to smoke. All of it remains, not as sound, but as weight, as memory, as presence. Pompeii is not a reconstruction. It is real. It is the moment the world stopped. The world beyond Pompeii has changed endlessly. Empires have vanished. Nations have risen. Technologies have rewritten the way we live. But the city beneath Vesuvius has remained almost still. Like an ancient heartbeat beneath the soil, it doesn't rush, it doesn't shout, it waits. And every time someone sets foot within its walls, that heartbeat grows louder. Pompeii is more than the story of a disaster. It is a story of how memory can outlast catastrophe. Ash fell like a curtain meant to end a play, but instead it preserved the stage. The actors are gone, but their gestures are still here, frozen in their final act. The city became its own storyteller, locked beneath a crust of earth until human hands pulled it back into the light. And what it shows us is unsettling in its honesty. It does not hide its tragedy behind marble facades or heroic myths. It lays everything bare. A bakery where bread was left in the oven, a tavern where cups were abandoned mid-drink, a garden where the roots of vines still curl through ancient soil. The homes of the rich and the rooms of the poor sit side by side, leveled by the same fury. Pompeii does not choose whose story to tell. It tells them all. This is why Pompeii lingers in the human imagination long after visitors leave its gates. It is not a distant myth. It is a mirror. It shows us how fragile the rhythms of life truly are, how quickly ordinary moments can turn into history, how everything we think will last forever can be silenced in a heartbeat. But it also shows something else, that what we leave behind has power, that even the smallest traces of a life lived can speak centuries later. Around the world, in museums and books and screens, Pompeii is studied, dissected, retold. Yet the truest version of it isn't in the artifacts behind glass or the stories written on pages. It's in the air of the city itself, in the spaces between walls, in the silence that follows when a guide stops talking and the crowd listens to nothing but the wind moving through ancient streets. In those moments, Pompeii is not a ruin, it is a living ghost. The eruption of Vesuvius has been measured, modeled, analyzed, but no amount of data can capture what it must have felt like to be there, to look up and see the sky falling, to feel the ground tremble beneath your feet, to run, to hide, to realize you are part of something far larger than yourself. That moment was human fear and nature's power meeting face to face. Pompeii is the imprint of that encounter. But if the eruption shows the cruelty of time, the survival of Pompeii shows its strange mercy. The same force that destroyed it ensured its memory. Without the mountain, the city might have faded away like so many others, crumbled stone by stone until nothing remained. Instead, it endures a tragedy, yes, but also a gift, a lesson wrapped in ash, and it is a lesson that grows sharper with every century. We build cities that rise into the clouds. We surround ourselves with glass, steel, and light. We believe we are permanent. Pompeii whispers otherwise. It reminds us that no civilization, no matter how advanced or powerful, can escape the hand of time. But it also reminds us that even when we are gone, our stories can remain, not as monuments but as echoes, as traces, as fragments waiting to be found. There is something humbling in that, something deeply human. The people of Pompeii never planned to be remembered. They lived ordinary lives. They worked, they argued, they prayed, they dreamed, and yet, because of what happened to them, they became eternal witnesses. Their city became a message carved into ash, a reminder of how much history is carried not by the powerful, but by the ordinary. Today, millions visit Pompeii each year, each carrying their own questions into its streets. Some come to marvel at the ruins, others to feel the weight of history. Some seek beauty, some seek silence, all leave with a story that doesn't quite let go. Because Pompeii has a way of reaching into the present and quietly holding it still, if only for a moment. As dusk falls, the ruins are bathed in amber light. The stones glow softly. The outlines of old columns stretch across the ground like the shadows of forgotten people. Vesuvius looms in the background, unmoving, indifferent. The modern world is only a few steps away. Cars, lights, noise. But here, inside the walls, it feels like the world outside has vanished. Time has folded in on itself again. The past breathes. That is Pompeii's power. Not to overwhelm, but to endure. To remind us of what was, and of what will someday be left behind of us. The city that time froze still stands, not because it defied destruction, but because destruction itself became its preservation. And through it, the lives of strangers from 2,000 years ago continued to speak in ways no monument ever could. Pompeii is not finished. It will keep unfolding layer by layer, story by story. Each discovery is another heartbeat, another reminder, another voice pulled out of the ash. And long after we are gone, perhaps the city will still be there, whispering to whoever listens next, not shouting, not pleading, just existing, quiet, steady, eternal. In the end, Pompeii is not about the eruption. It is about everything that came before, and everything that came after. It is about the resilience of memory, the fragility of life, and the strange, beautiful way the past finds a way to speak. It is a city that died once, but through us, it will never truly be silent again.